It's only temporary. I'll lift it out. Socket, I'll put it upside down so the pins don't get touched. The pads don't get touched, not the pins, I'm sorry. So now we're just going to open up the other box with the other processor. This is a Ryzen 5 7600 instead. Hopefully it doesn't require discrete graphics. No, it does not. Okay, we should be able to boot off of this. I'm not going to take the whole fan out. I'm just going to swap it because we're only going to temporarily swap this to get the BIOS updated. It's not going with the customer. It's going to come back to us. So that's fine. We're just not going to go crazy here. We're just going to get it operational with the new BIOS so that we can put the processor that the customer purchased instead into the unit, which is a better processor. We're going to line up the arrows, which we did. Arrow to the top. Push it in. Close the bracket down. The lever down. I'm going to put a little bit of thermal paste, but honestly, there's actually enough thermal paste here that might be okay. It's very temporary, so let's just use what's here because it's very temporary. And if the CPU temperature goes out of craziness, we'll fix that before we do the BIOS then. But if it doesn't run away, it should be fine. The temperature run away, I mean. Realigning the CPU cooling fan. And I'm just going to screw everything down. Just do each side corner so you don't accidentally put too much pressure on top of the IHS. Now, CPU fan is going to be plugged into the top header, which is also labeled CPU fan 1. I'm going to plug that in, and we're going to just carefully move this processor out of the way. We're going to put this somewhere safe. We're ready to give it a boot test at this point. Oop, there we go. Reset TFTP, that's fine. This is normal. Gonna reset again. Just gonna go into the BIOS. Let me take these gloves off. Gonna go into the BIOS. And we're gonna check to make sure the temperature is good. Core temperature right now is at 44, 43 degrees Celsius. Let's see if it gathers up as we go. We'll just go into something to kind of make it go nuts here, which is fine. It looks like it's okay. It is holding. So I'm going to take the motherboard BIOS, which I have on a flash drive over here somewhere, 4245. I'm hoping that we can get the BIOS updated before this reaches too much temperature. We'll just, I know there's not much thermal paste there, so it is a little bit of a concern. Let's go to M Flash. We're going to click on M Flash. Yes, it's going to enter flashing mode. It's going to reboot. The biggest problem with AMD right now is that it takes a very long time to restart. Especially with the new memory training, it just takes forever, so we are waiting. There it goes. Now it's entering flash mode. And it found the disk with the flash BIOS version. We're going to go to the newest one. Just going to let it go. CPU temperature is kind of getting up there at 51 degrees. Getting a little nervous about that, but that's okay. It's, you know, it's just going to do the flash and then we're going to reboot. As long as it doesn't reach like 80 or 90, we'll be all right. Yeah, it's going from version 1.2 to 1.8. So that was a big jump. And that's probably why the other processor was not being supported, was because obviously the support for the newer processors is only available to this board on version 1.8. A little word of advice, if you are updating your own BIOS, be sure to update it with full power. Do not update during a lightning storm or something, or on an unsecure outlet. I recommend you probably put it on something like a UPS battery or something like that so that it just can handle the flashing without having a problem. So if, like, let's say you do lose power, you won't end up with a brick motherboard. It'll just continuously use the UPS power. If you don't have a UPS battery, then just be very careful during this update process. Do not touch the machine, do not jiggle it or anything. Just let it do its job. Don't move the table or anything funny. Let it complete its update. Don't breathe heavy on it. You know what I mean? Just stay away from it. Once this process is complete, it's going to reboot again. You're going to go back into the BIOS one more time, just to be sure that the BIOS is fully up to date before you change the processor to the new processor, or in this case, the customer's processor. This process should take about 5 minutes, maybe 10. If your motherboard has a flashback utility, you won't actually have to swap the processor. Unfortunately, this motherboard does not have a flashback utility. Most motherboards do not. So unless you have a really expensive motherboard, then you may have a flashback utility where you can actually upgrade the BIOS without actually putting a processor in. It's kind of neat to have that, but it's not necessary. It would be necessary. It would be nice to have it in this case. You wouldn't have to switch out a processor. But it is also very difficult to establish a flashback utility by using the USB flash drive, and you have to push a button a few times to get it to load, and it's not very visual like this is to let you know it's done. Okay, so we're done, and it's going to reboot again. That's okay. We're going to reboot into the BIOS, so I'm going to just tap the delete key while we wait for it to boot. Again, it's a very slow reboot. This is an AMD processor. The AM5 has a very slow memory training. It takes time for it to go through all the memory training settings. This is normal. It will boot a little bit faster over time once we get everything set up. Now, what you want to do is just double check to make sure we're on the correct BIOS version. And the build is 180, which is correct on the top by the mouse, and we're good to go. So now what I'm going to do is power off the unit and switch out the processor. Okay, so now we're basically going to take this processor out. So we're going to disconnect this power fan. We're going to also unscrew it. That's a little hot. All right. I get some new gloves. I'm going to clean up all the thermal paste that's on here. And we're going to apply fresh paste to the new processor. And I say new processor, but I mean the processor that the customer purchased, the swapped processor. By the way, be sure to use gloves while you are taking on and off thermal paste. You do not want that on your fingers. It is very annoying to get rid of once it is on your fingers. I use a little more isopropyl alcohol. I can't even say that. Isopropyl alcohol, and take off all of the thermal paste that's on the processor. So I'm just going to take this off. We're going to repack this processor because this is still a good processor. We can use it for another motherboard booting, or we can resell it, I guess, because it's perfectly brand new. Okay, just gonna put it back in its case. We're gonna put the processor that the customer purchased back in. Just a little temporary map thing. Again, you're gonna line up the arrow to the arrow on the motherboard. And you're just gonna drop the processor in its socket. Go. Put the latch down. A lever. And what you're going to do is you're going to clean off the CPU fan first of all. So it's got all this garbage on it. You're going to clean that off really quick. Again, you can use the same paper towel. It's the same amount of alcohol. Just rub it down, rub it off. Put this stuff off so you have a clean surface. You don't want to mix thermal pastes. Be sure to not do that. You should always use clean thermal paste, a clean application. You don't want to mix them because they may have different properties, and that would be really bad. It's not really, really bad, but it is kind of bad. So just don't do that. just have a nice clean surface. We'll wait a few seconds for it to dry while I find the thermal paste. You're going to put the thermal paste on the processor, not on the fan. The fan has sometimes pre-applied thermal paste, but that's not the best way to do it. It will drip all over the place. You're better off putting it directly onto the CPU. So what you're going to do is you're going to just basically put a little blob in the middle. It's probably a little much. It will spread by itself. If you're worried about it spreading evenly, you can get a piece of plastic like fork or something, or a knife, and just a little plastic knife, and you can just spread it across if you really want to. That will allow you to spread it nice and evenly, or you can just let the pressure of this, squish it down. I'm going to let the pressure because it's perfectly fine. I haven't really found that much of a difference between the two, so should be fine with this. If I can find the standoff, there we go. Same thing, reverse. You just want to screw in each side. You want to go corner to corner. Can't see. No. Okay. Just make sure it's all the way down. All screws are locked. Connect the fan back. So you're going to connect the fan to the CPU fan header, which only goes one direction. So you just plug it in. Okay. After you plug it in, you may want to tuck the cable in just to kind of keep it out of the way, which is what I'm going to do. And we're ready to boot with the new processor. And by new processor, I mean the processor that the customer ordered. So let's make sure the temperatures are good and everything is good to go. If the temperatures are really, really bad, then something went wrong with the thermal paste application, or we didn't screw down this CPU heatsink fan correctly. So let's go hook it back up. Powering back on, it may still take a few seconds to retrain from memory, so that's okay. Just wait it out. You may have a black screen for a little while. This is normal. While this is going, you're going to see pretty much a black screen, so give it a few seconds, maybe about a minute, and then you're going to get a message that's going to say that you need to enter the BIOS. That's okay. It's going to reset again. Again, it's going to still take a few seconds to get back into the BIOS if you hit the delete key or F1 at this point. It's going to reset. It says new installed CPU only supports up to 4x PCI lanes. That's fine. And we're going to because the new graphic card they're putting in doesn't go over that anyway. So just double check the processor, which it is at the top over here. It says AMD Ryzen 5 8500G with Radeon 740M graphics, which is perfectly fine. Temperature has dropped down to 42, which is good. Memory, we're gonna do a few things. We're gonna change a few things around just to be sure we're at the proper speeds. And let me just double check. I like to go to the advanced because I like to see everything, which is F7. I checked the date really quick, which is probably wrong, and it is not that. 04. It is 10/2024. And time is late. It is 8:40, so 8:2040, right? Am I wrong? That's going to reset anyway. All right, so check the rest of the information. You want to go back and you want to go to advanced. You want to make sure everything looks correct. Integrated graphics should be on, but I'm going to leave PEG just in case to initiate the PCIe slot because we are adding a graphic card later. You can turn that off if you want it to boot just a little bit faster. I'm going to turn off the serial port. Power management, we're going to leave it pretty much at all off. UEFI is put fine. Secure erase, we're not doing that. The MSI driver installer, I disable this. This is an annoying pop-up that comes up in Windows 11. If you don't disable that, it will continuously pop up. NVMe test, you can run this if you want. We're not doing that. We're just going to do, no, we're not doing any overclocking. Boot, we're going to boot up to the flash drive, which I did not plug in. So let me plug the flash drive back in. And we're going to boot off the flash drive. So USB hard disk probably is the one I want. I'm going to disable all the rest. So there's no other option. Doesn't just go into its own little thing. Post beep, I don't like that. I'm going to leave that off. Unlock. Yep. Just leave everything else the same. Save settings and exit. Let's double check the memory speed actually before we do that. DDR speed is showing 4800, so that is not correct. So we're going to go back. We're going to go over to clocking, I guess. We're going to check the XMP memory. I'm going to enable it. And now it's showing 6400 megahertz, which is correct. So now we're going to escape. We're going to go over to escape again. No, settings, sorry. Settings, save and exit. Save changes and reboot. It's going to just review what you basically made changes to. Hit yes, it's going to reboot. And now we can boot into Windows, install Windows, as long as everything tests out. Now we usually do a memory test also. I'm not going to show a memory test. We have another video on memory tests, so you can always look at that one to show how we do a memory test. We will do a memory test before it reaches the customer, but I don't want to do that on video because it literally takes like all evening to run. So we're just waiting for it to boot. It's going to take a few minutes to get booted. Once it's booted up, it's going to go into Windows 11 to install. Should boot off the flash drive. The reboot, sometimes it's twice. Just that's the way it works with AMD. Intel kind of does the same thing. Especially the newer 13th gen Intels do the same thing where it takes a little longer to do memory training and it looks like it has to reboot a few times. That's okay. Now it should be booting into the Windows installation media. That's why it's taking so long. Choose your language, hit next, install. It's going to ask about a product key. I'm not going to put one in because we're obviously recording. So go to Windows 11 Pro. If you have a product key, just enter it. It'll actually automatically choose your operating system based off your product key, or you could just choose your installation at this point. We're going to do a simple setup. We're going to choose the main drive, and it's going to be a full C drive. There's no data drive or partition. They just want something simple, so it's just going to be straight C. If you have a data drive, I recommend that you disconnect your data drive before you start loading in Windows 11 to make sure that you're only using the drive that basically is only for the operating system, so you don't accidentally erase your data. It's going to go through this process, then we're going to reboot, we go back to the BIOS, and we're going to change it to the Windows Boot Manager once that's done. We're also going to skip the Microsoft account. This installation also has a configuration file that basically says no to the Microsoft account. I don't want the Microsoft account because we want local user accounts. It's easier to manage and less tracking sent to Microsoft, so we're all better off. Now, if you have a use for a Microsoft account, go ahead and use it. Just be careful if you have to reset your password. Sometimes the password resets on the Microsoft accounts don't work too well, especially if the computer during the Microsoft account resets are not actually on. It can't pick up the new connection, and then if your network drops out during that time, you'll have a problem also. So that's why we don't use them. We're going to change the boot. We're in the BIOS now. We're just going to change up the boot back to the Windows Boot Manager. It says hard disk drive, and it has the model of the disk that it's been installed on. That's fine. Save changes, and reboot. You want to change that because you want to boot off the main drive. If you don't change that, you're going to go back into the setup again. You're going to go back to Windows 11 setup, and you're going in a circle at that point. This may reboot a few times. It's going to show this. It's going to say getting devices ready or getting things ready. That is normal. It's going to reboot again after that. If you notice, the reboot time is getting a little bit faster ever since we got through the BIOS updates and settings changes. It is starting to get a little quicker. This is normal. It's just only when it has to retrain memory that you have some issues with boot time. Getting ready. It's probably going to reboot again. At this time, I usually check the front LED panels to make sure that the LED lights are working and everything else is blinking correctly. The power light's working. You know, these little things I should check while I'm waiting for it to load. If any of those lights aren't working, you may want to shut everything down and, you know, once you get into Windows, shut everything down and come back into connecting those up correctly. It's taking a little while. This is normal. The speed of this is just, every machine is kind of a little slow on this. It really doesn't go much faster than this. Another reboot. And you see that the reboot times still take a decent amount of time, but you'll see they improve over time. And then sometimes when you shut the machine off and you leave it off for a little while and you turn it back on, it may need to also spend a little more time starting up. There is fast boot enabled also. There's an option for fast boot. I don't think it's actually on. I usually wait to turn that on until we get all the hardware set up and everything is perfectly good. Yeah, it's doing memory training again. There it goes. All right, now we're booting. Yeah, definitely a USB issue. Now, when we go into Windows, this is going to go through the open box experience. This is normal. It's going to ask you a bunch of dumb questions like setting up your keyboard and what United States we're in. So we're in the United States. We're going to hit yes. Yes, on the keyboard layout for United States, we're going to skip adding a second keyboard. We're going to go to I don't have internet. We're going to go continue with limited setup. It's going to ask you for a username. We're going to put just B1 for our user, but you should put your own password. You should choose a password. We're going to leave it empty for now, just so that we can reboot faster. It's going to take a few minutes for it to set up the rest of Windows. This is normal. Just leave the machine on like it says to do. Wait patiently until Windows boots up. We're going to load drivers next, and we're going to load the Windows updates next. This process takes about the same time on every machine. No matter how slow or fast it is, it still takes a long time for it to fully complete. We're almost there. We got this going. We're going to connect the USB flash drive that I already have all the drivers on. Open it. We're going to copy my B1 folder, which I already created. So I'm going to copy this down to the C drive. The B1 folder, and we're gonna have a bunch of drivers. So this is the BIOS, which we already did. So we're gonna start with the chipset drivers next. We're gonna right click, extract all, extract. It's gonna extract into another folder. Open it up, double click, set it up. It's gonna say that you can't check for security. That's fine, just run it. I already know these are already cleared and they don't have a virus, but it won't be able to connect to the internet until all of this is done. We don't want to connect to the internet until it's all done anyway, because we want to make sure that we have everything, all the drivers that are from the manufacturer correct. This is AMD chipset driver. You're going to just go straight through the ones that we downloaded from the website. To obtain these, you just go to the motherboard manufacturer's website, download all the chipset drivers, audio, graphical, any type of drivers that you may need. DPIO driver, this is all fine. Next, install. The system is going to definitely act funky until those drivers are in. We're also going to change the date and time settings right now. And I'm going to change the time zone. Let's use Eastern because that's where we're at. The times are going to be all off until we connect to the internet. That's okay, just leave it. Chipset's done. We're going to hit close. We're not going to restart. We're going to extract the next one, which is the RAID driver, which I don't think we need. So we're just going to double check if we need it. No, we don't need this one, so it should be fine without it. VGA driver, we're going to extract that. Again, speed and everything will be a little funky until the system's drivers are fully up to date. So this might be a little slower until the drivers are patched. This is normal. It's going to do the same thing. Smart screen can't be reached. That's okay. Yes, continue. Let it load the drivers. Realtek, we can work on the next and extract that. That's going to be your audio driver. The chipset is the only one that I recommend that you do at once compared to everything else. Like the graphic card, the audio drivers, you can go on and move on to the next one just to go faster and do one reboot. Just the chipset one does something funny where you may want to have that 100% before you do the next set. If you're unsure, you can always reboot every time after each one of these installations if you don't feel comfortable doing the other way. Okay, it's going to install the drivers, the Adrenaline drivers. I don't want to restart right now, so we're just going to do that. Audio is done. PCI LAN, extract. Same process, you're just repeating it over and over and over again. That's the one. Now, when you install the graphic card driver, that just blipped the video. That's fine. It's going to blip it out. It's going to go black on you. That is normal. Again, things are going to act a little funny until everything is installed. I do the Ethernet driver. All right, once that is done, we're going to do a reboot and we're going to connect the Ethernet cable at that point so that we can get everything else updated, like the regular Windows updates, patches, and all that fun stuff. Now it's going to try to detect the network card. Don't worry about that, just hit finish. We're going to now do a start and reboot. And while it's rebooting, I'm going to connect the Ethernet driver, the Ethernet card that's on the system, which is basically built into the board. I'm going to disconnect our USB flash drive right now because we don't need that anymore. System's going to reboot. There we go. That reboot was a lot faster than the previous ones. It's going to auto log us in because we didn't set up a password. Now this may take longer than normal because it's now on the network. We have to make sure the date and time are set correct first. Change date and time. We're going to resync that now. That's now correct. And now we're going to do a Windows update. First, going to go through all the updates. The Windows is not activated right now. We have to put a key in. To put a key in, you could go to System and then go down to Activation and hit Change Product Key, and you can add a product key. Can't do that on video because we obviously have to show a product key, and I really don't want to show a product key during a video. We're going to let this update. Now, when this updates, it's going to probably come with a bunch. Yeah, there it goes. Even with the newest ISO that I downloaded, which is the newest installation of Windows 11, it still has some patches that it will not be included in that ISO. It's also going to try to install the AMD system drivers. It's probably going to realize that we already have them installed eventually, so it may not pick that up. It may change its mind on that. I don't know why it's doing this. Downloading and then going to install. Let's hit install on these. During this time, I usually like to edit the power plan. Choose a different power plan. We're going to choose high performance. Change the settings. We're going to go in here. We're going to disable turning off the disk because there's no need for that. Power saving, maximum performance. We're going to make sure sleep is off, hibernate is off. Everything else is pretty much disabled. Suspend for the USB is off. We really want the system to be at maximum performance. I also like to set the timeout for the monitor to be 35 minutes because it's a business computer. And they'll be using it off and on, but sometimes they'll be looking away for like 10 to 15 minutes and they don't want it to shut off the monitor on them. So again, the user can always set that up to be differently. It's not set in stone. While that's going, we also know that this client wants Chrome. So we're going to load Chrome for them. We just use Edge to get to Chrome, which is kind of annoying, but do that. We're not going to sign in. We're going to set this as default. I'm going to just change that. And then we're going to change the PDF also. SVG. We have to do these manually for whatever reason. Microsoft doesn't switch all of them over, or maybe it's Google that doesn't switch all of them over. That's it for that. Got it. We're going to set our home page for them. They usually change this, but we're just going to put it there so they have something that shows up, tries to connect to something. Blank pages just don't prove if the internet's running or not. So at least this way, we'll know something's coming up. We'll install the rest. What's with this? We don't need that. We'll install the rest of the updates. We'll reboot again, and then we're going to do a Windows bloatware removal tool. We get rid of that, and we'll set up the personalization. We'll also set up some of the menus down here, which we can do right now while we're waiting. I like to turn off widgets. I don't like the search box. It's going to probably come up with that stupid Copilot thing, which we're going to turn off. Also, I like to go into here and go to System and Notifications, go to the Advanced section or Additional Settings, uncheck these because those are annoying. They start up when Windows starts up, and it slows the startup speed, and it also is garbage when it installs like that. So we'll let this go. We should do privacy settings as well. I like to uncheck all this tracking crap. A lot of this doesn't pertain to the user. We're not going to have it submit feedback. Search permissions, we usually turn these off. It's allowed to search anywhere. This is a business computer, it's fine. They have usually, if a customer wants more filtering, we usually don't recommend setting it up this way. We recommend setting it up more at the firewall. So, you know, we can actually restrict better and also know what's being restricted a lot easier than at the workstation. The workstation doesn't make any sense to do that. And most of the time it picks it up wrong, so that's another issue. Location data, we do allow an override if they want. Camera, we leave on for this, but we do let the customer know that this is on. And because we have to leave this on if they want to use like Zoom or something, they're not going to be able to use Zoom if we turn this off. They'll have a hard time. Microphone, same thing. Voice activation, I do turn off. It's annoying. Notifications, we leave it on for now, just so that other apps can use it. My other big one that I like to change is the background apps or anything that's loading the background. Other devices should be off. Everything else should be okay. We'll let this install. It's going to install all of this, and then we're going to do another reboot, and then we do a bloatware removal. And then that's about it. And we activate it and we do everything else for the customer off video. We do a lot of customizations for customers, just letting you guys know that when we install for a customer, we do go through all of their custom software that needs to be loaded. Anything that they request to be loaded, we make sure that we put their licensing in for them. We make sure that their licensing is documented properly, make sure they're licensed properly across most most software. The only software we don't touch is if it's like a custom program or something like that. Custom programs, we try to work with the developer to make sure that we can install it for them, or at least let them know that we are changing a system out, and if they need to install it themselves, then we have to give them access to that system temporarily so they can install the remaining software. But we do work with other vendors, we do work with other software companies. We're not limited to that. We don't just, close out all these other companies because we have to only use our software or use our thing. We just recommend that whatever they're using is, reliable. And if it's not reliable, then we need to make sure for the developer what hardware they need to make it reliable. A lot of custom software out there does not allow for different graphic cards or different, processors, specific processors they need. We like to do that before we start purchasing things, of course. We will usually check with that one specific developer to make sure that their software is really picky, and we make sure that we have the hardware that fits it perfectly fine. And this does take hours of our time, but it's part of the sales process, and it does work better if we have all the questions answered before we go and show up on location for the new installation of a computer or transfer of an old computer to a new computer. Okay, hopefully this reboot is faster than the last one. Let's see. The last one's pretty quick, but I'm always going for faster here. All right, this is going to reboot once more probably. Yep, here we go. This is normal with Windows updates. This is how it patches. Just basically sit back, wait until you get back to the login screen, which should be showing up very shortly. There we go. All right, once this is booted, we're just going to make sure that there are no more updates before we do the Windows bloatware removal tool that we have. Why do we do this? Because Windows updates, if there are more updates, sometimes it reinstalls some of the programs, and you'll have to run the Windows bloatware removal tool twice to make sure everything's gone. So you just had another update for the antivirus. That's fine. Completed. Check it one more time until you see it completed. Everything's completed. Good. So now we're going to open up Start. We're going to go to Windows PowerShell. We're going to run it as administrator. We're going to change to the path where I put our script. I'm going to show how to run it. Oops. Yep. We're going to run this command here. Set execution policy remote signed. We're going to say yes to all. And then we're going to run the script. So we're going to say ampersand and then say remove. And it's going to say remove bloatware PS1. It's just going to do a little funky thing at the top. That's good to go. Let it run. Once it's done, you're going to notice that most of these programs have been taken out. There are just a few remaining ones that you have to uninstall because they just are not actually installed. They're just icons, but they do not unpin, they do not uninstall from PowerShell, so we have to do it manually. Edge, we can unpin, but it gets rid of a lot of other stuff that you may not want on a business computer. And on a business computer, like the Xbox stuff is a good example, all of that stuff should be removed, which is now gone from the add or remove programs or installed apps. And you don't need any of that stuff. We've also removed a lot of the software that was already pre-installed, a lot of sticky note stuff, etc. that we just don't prefer. You could always review that script. That script is open source, so you can change it, you know, any which way you want. It's not compiled or anything. We only had really one glitch, was basically the processor being too new and the motherboard being a little bit older, not having the newest BIOS. So we had to put the other processor in, update it, etc. This also, that service, that, you know, if you're buying from like Micro Center or something like that, you can go to Micro Center back and let them update your BIOS for you. You know, they may charge you a few dollars if they need to, or they may even do it for free because you bought the motherboard from them and you need to get your processor to work with that. So that's another thing. Or you can also go to, you know, if you bought it on Newegg, there's some options there. They may ask you to return the board, and they may just return it for support, get it updated, and then return it back to you. That takes a little longer, of course, because you would have to wait for shipping and all that stuff. You do have options to get that to work, or you can buy another processor that will fit the board, or if you know somebody that has a processor that you could just borrow and, you know, do that, update the BIOS for you, and then give you the, you know, machine back. That's it for now. Look at other videos. We also have some other videos on the Windows bloatware removal tool, as well as some other videos coming down about RAM checking and stuff like that. So you may want to stay subscribed for that if you're into, you know, building a system. We'll see you in the next one. Thanks and have a great day.